So we're going to talk about today the cracks in our foundations. That's what I like to talk about it. It's a play on a song that I love. When you know, you know. And it's also part of my book, like the beginning of my book. So what are the cracks in the foundations in the pelvic floor work? And why is the pelvis being not tended to? How is it being ignored? And why is it that overall this is creating problems for women? So much to say. So we're going to talk about that because it's going to give you a really good foundation moving forward as to why the problem is there. And if this is your first time pregnant and first baby, then you will potentially not fully have seen how poor the pelvic floor support is. So I'm celebrating you for engaging in this and supporting yourself with this because it's going to create a really beautiful foundation for you to work from that is not being provided in the system today. The pelvic floor is not being tended to as it should and as it is in other nations. I see it personally as an attack on women to ensure that they remain with the trauma and the binds that birth is creating. And on top of that, of course, then perpetually creating this binding issue cyclically for women so that they do not feel that they can speak out and feel that they receive the support that they need. And it binds them on every level, creatively, it binds them physically, it binds them in an emotional sense, it binds them from doing things that they would love to do with their children, it binds them on a spiritual level. The way that we target women is through the pelvis. That's how women are targeted. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, what the target looks like. Yes, it matters with what a woman has been through, but there will be trauma from umpteen different experiences with the pelvis. And when there's war, there's rape. And so, what we have to acknowledge is that attacking and aiming for the pelvis is part and parcel of removing people's power. So I believe on a spiritual and energetic and social issue that the pelvis is consistently ignored and bypassed and targeted as a removal of a woman's power. And so it also creates money, it creates more problems. So what we want to do is we want to tend to our pelvis so that at the end of this journey, we don't just feel like, oh, we gave birth, however, the birth ends for us. If we feel an empowered state for having the birth that we lusted after, we also want to feel this deep seated fucking joy and passion and empowerment and expansion that then carries on after the birth. Not just the birth event itself, not just in that moment, not just in that week, not just in those 40 days, but ongoing. And I hear too many stories of whether the birth was the outcome that they wanted or the birth wasn't the outcome that they wanted, that they still feel that there is an aftermath where they haven't been tended to with their pelvic floor. Therefore, we have to tend to the pelvic floor, and it is not happening. And what happens is that when you give birth, nobody is guiding women on how to actually tend to their pelvic floor and how to actually tend to their pelvis overall. And so you get very poor postpartum care through the UK system, through the NHS, for example, or potentially through the system that you're in. And so what happens is they often just say, are you doing your Kegels? Are you doing your squeezies? Are you doing your pelvic floor? And it's a tick box exercise to make sure that you have answered yes. And until you answer yes, they don't have the tick box ability to say that they've done their due diligence and said, yeah, checked in, they're doing their pelvic floor. And so a lot of women are free falling from that moment because they often ask that question immediately near to having had a baby. And you are not going to be doing your pelvic floor in that moment. It is not something that needs to be squeezed. It is not something that needs to be tended to, in my opinion. Now, we take this opinion as somebody who works holistically, who asks, farts around in her holistic way and pisses off NHS staff or whoever else. Also, there are physiotherapists who welcome the chat that I've had, or osteopaths that welcome my chat, and the odd midwife that likes to hear what I have to say. But overall, it looks like I'm a total Fruit Loop. And so you've bought this course and now you've started. And I always say, once you're committed, you might as well go all in and hear what I have to say. Because at the end of it, I can promise you from the bottom of my heart that it's unlikely that anyone else has given you as much of a rounded opinion and as many tools as I have in order to support yourself and become your own inner healer. With me holding up my mirror and projecting back the bullshit that exists in society and binds women into this challenging time that then becomes ongoing for years. And I've seen it all. Not all, probably, but a lot of it in this space with women who have had an episiotomy and have had to have reconstructive surgery, and it took them 20 years to have it. One example. I have seen women who have an episiotomy and still haven't recovered their pelvic floor. I've seen women who go to a physiotherapist for years, get told to do their Kegels, they come and see me, and their strength is like doubled within 6 months. And they don't tell the physiotherapists that they ignored their squeezies. And then when they're asked, why is it doubled then, do we think? They'll just say, because we were weightlifting. But you couldn't be weightlifting with the pelvic floor that you had before. So the work that we do does matter, in my opinion. So, therefore, what we have to do is understand how to actually tend to the pelvic floor, not just do our squeezes. And when we're told to do our pelvic floor, we want to be able to be in an empowered state where we can say to the midwife, sure. But we don't want to go into the ins and out unless you want to tell them that you've been doing this really amazing course and you'd love them to learn more about it so they could give them recommendations and maybe it become on the NHS and maybe people could actually learn about the emotional, physical, spiritual holding of the pelvis after all. But let's just say you just say, sure, so that she can do her tick box and say, you've done it, or he. Therefore, what we want to do is allow for an empowered state to say that so that we know that we have the tools to be able to actually tend to our pelvic floor, not just, are you doing your pelvic floor? Yeah, doing it right now. Don't know what to do, feeling a little bit overwhelmed, feeling like you might still struggle to have a shit, or feeling like you can't actually still feel that contraction when you're having a wee, and feeling like whether you'll ever have sex again, whether you'll ever have an orgasm again, and whether the stitches or the tear or the episiotomy will ever heal. It will if it's actually tended to properly with the proper tools that need to happen on a holistic level, in my opinion. Always, in my opinion, prefaced with holistic. And so the issue is overall that we're keeping women in this cycle because we're not giving them the tools that they need, and you will be in a situation where you are not tended to. Sometimes a midwife will check, for example, a C-section scar, or they'll check on bleeding, for example, but you are not going to be tended to with your pelvic floor. And this is quite frankly mind-blowing because the prep, the antenatal prep, is huge. Birth is a mere blip in the whole journey that we're on. And the postpartum is the biggest event. And so I'm really passionate about a woman being given everything that she needs in order to tend to herself postnatally, and whether she's getting that postnatal support or whether she's just allowing herself to understand how to tend to herself, and so she has others support her as well, then however that looks, that needs to happen for women. This must happen for women. And so I'm celebrating you. That's the foundations, that's the cracks. We're yet to start finding any way of filling in those massive craters. And what we're going to do is we're going to move forward with what needs to happen, but also we need to learn why Kegels aren't actually the answer. Sending love.